All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dustin Hillis, Chair of the Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm joined by, to my far right, Councilmember Antonio Lewis, followed by Councilmember Waits, followed by Councilmember Boone, and to my immediate left, Councilmember Murray Norwood, followed by Councilmember Michael Julian Bond, and we do constitute a quorum. I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Lewis. Please prepare the vote.
One moment, Mr. Chair.
Wait says aye.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas and 0 nays. The agenda is adopted. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the prior meeting. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Lewis. Please prepare the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Yeas, 0 nays. Prior minutes were approved. When I move to public comment, first up I have Henri Jordan.
Here, O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? Romans 7, chapter 24, verse. O wretched man, the reference here is to Paul's tragic condition of defeat and frustration with sin. The fight against sin in yourself and others through the power of Jesus is life. And James Griff, this is the blessing to choose. There's a generation that curses their father and does not bless their mother. Proverbs 30, chapter 11, verse. Several sets of wise pronouncements on some of the people, things, and situations that are observable in the ongoing activities of life. The Lord said to work with the homeless, calling on Jesus, will help my children to be faithful to me. Therefore, thou art inexcusable, O man, whosoever thou art that judges, for when thou judgest another, thou condemnest thyself. For thou that judgest doest the same things. Romans 2nd chapter 1st verse. The fundamental principle of divine judgment is that God will judge according to truth, deeds, life, and the gospel, which reveals human thoughts and motives. The government promised to promote justice, and they don't. He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it, and whoso breaketh an edge, a serpent shall bite him. Ecclesiastes 10, chapter 8, verse. Everyday activities may result in disasters that no one can predict. Jesus promised those who seek to conquer sin in thyself and others through his power will inherit everlasting life. I had a dream of the city agreed to how Jesus used me, then I can work with the city agreed how to work with me, how Jesus used me, then I can work with the city in Cobb City. Christ gave me the gift to promote his word to live in us. If you work against his word, I will be in the flesh and cannot work with you. Jesus told me to promote his word because it is more stable than yours. And Jesus' word created the income, not my word. It's the gift that Christ gave me, not the gift I gave to myself. I don't control it like Jesus can. He can increase the gift and make it lesser, but it's promote his word, his will, his protection for us if we seek to obey him. Without Jesus, I can't do nothing. I can't live. You also can't neither. But Christ has the words of death and life to give us. And I thank him for it.
Next, DeJuan Robinson.
Good afternoon, panel. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bond, Ms. Waits, Ms. Boone, and Mr. Hillis, we have an issue in District 9. We have been playing softball over there for 3 years. We have the biggest gatherings in the city. Ms. Boner, you may be familiar with my friend who coming up here next, Mr. Brandon Gooch, that had the skating ring party, 2 skating ring parties, the biggest ever events in Atlanta with 0 violence. So police, when you guys see these big events in Atlanta going on with no violence, Mr. Gooch is the head of that, and we should be praised for that. But guess what we getting? We getting a gentleman coming down here to have the contract with APD harassing us every Sunday morning. Nobody have used this park, Mr. Hillis, in District 9 since I was a kid. The police precinct used to be a clinic where we used to go get our shots at. Became a police precinct, and the softball field over to the south on that little narrow street have not been used, Mr. Bond. I'm 46. Have not been used in all these years. We come over there, we cut the grass. We do everything over there. No violence, no trash there, no nothing. But we get harassed every single morning for the last month or so by a certain particular gentleman. And APD don't like going over there, but this gentleman has the contract to enforce it, and they have to do what they got to do. They've been paid $60 an hour to enforce. We playing softball. We got people from Councilman Lewis district, Councilman Boone district. We got everybody from Atlanta that normally don't get along, but because Brandon Gooch was a star football player, he bring all these people together when they have events in the city. 0 violence now, 0 violence. Everybody come over there, you know what I'm saying, and play. Have a good time, 0 parking issues. He paid for APD out of his pocket to control the parking because the street is so narrow. He paid to clean up. We have everything, we do everything right over there. But yet and still, this last month, nobody has never used this park. Now all of a sudden, oh, somebody want to use the park. Oh, somebody doing this, that, and the third. Nobody have never wanted to use that park. And I'm just saying, when it comes to public safety, I'm being honest with you, the things that this man do in the community, like when all the killing was going on a couple years ago, him and his friend, Lil Baby and those guys, he got all the artists to get together and buy 200 water guns from every zone to get together and have water fights instead of guns. No violence. We don't praise that, man. You know what I'm saying? We sit and we harass that. But this man, every event this man had, not one fight, not one gun incident, no killings, no nothing. And we talking about where thousands gather and not one incident. And I think that helped APD job a lot when you can gather people from every community, from every zone, and 0 fights, no arguments, no nothing. I mean, we got to praise that. We got to stop harassing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Did you say what park this was, the Center Hill Park?
Yes, sir, the Center Hill Park.
All right, I'll look into that. Thank you. Councilmember Lewis.
And I know you said my name, and we talk about folks coming from my district. This is the best event in the city. I've been there. I saw it going on. I saw the different baseball programs going on, and I was wondering, I was trying to steal them. What I've been working on is trying to bring them over to my district so I can get them at Southside Park and do the same thing because I can't duplicate it. And it's every single district, and it's so organic. And he has like the food where people are just, it's like a use of the park, and I see them mowing the park. I see them taking care of the park. I see them closing the park down. And so he called me this weekend, and he knew my arms were tired, my hands were tired because it's a different district. But today he didn't want to shake my hand. And I understand why. He's a friend. He didn't want to shake my hand because he don't come down here. It's not a space he's supposed to be into, particularly when you have that kind of event with no violence. They're paying the police themselves. They're maintaining the park themselves. And so I appreciate him coming down here too, because this is where you bring it to.
Yeah, and you need to apologize for not shaking Mr. Lewis.
He shook my hand. I said he didn't want to. I looked in his eyes. I understood the anger. But that's the best event for a Sunday in the city of Atlanta. They've been going on for years. And I'm a person who's pulled up on a Sunday. The teams have their own jerseys. And they have new jerseys every week. These are just folks from the city of Atlanta pulling up to a park for a community. Most of them can't afford to live in the community anymore, but they come to the park and they play baseball for years, and I can't wait to steal it.
And if we offered to play against
if I can get
APD to
them
bring
to come
the
over there,
camaraderie back to the community. No, I'm just being
I want to
serious.
steal it. I
What
appreciate
APD don't
you.
understand is if you got people from every zone there, If these guys
All right,
play you,
Mr. Robinson, your
they have
time's
an
expired,
opportunity.
and
They
we're
wanna
going to hear from
compete
Mr.
against
Gooch next. So,
and it's a good thing for you guys.
Brandon Gooch.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brandon Gooch. I did a lot of couple events. I did a back to school event at Grove Park with Kyle Pitts. Had Little Baby donate some book bags. We gave up 1,000 book bags. I helped the DA's office get braiding and haircuts over at Welcome Our Park. I don't be want my name tied to a lot of stuff, but I do the softball Sunday. Some of you guys probably heard about it, hearing about it. Yes, I'm getting frustrated because now we do pay for police, me and the people that put it together, to protect, because you know what happened at the other park. We don't want the same thing to go on, and we was playing at the same time that they was playing. So you know it probably be frustrating to officers because they got to understand we playing softball the same way they was playing softball at Dunbar, and the situation occurred where 2 people got killed. At the same time, where we play softball at, we hired 3 police officers that we pay out of our pocket. It's getting a little frustrating because we dealing with someone who coming down and saying, y'all not playing softball today, y'all don't have a permit, We've been at this field going on now 3 years. We don't cut the grass before. We bought the bases that's at the park out of our pocket. The rakes that's down there to keep the dirt right, we bought that out of our pocket. The water spots that's sent over in the field when it rains, from the upkeep, we go out there Sunday morning early, 10 a.m., get the water off the field so we can play softball. We also have people coming from every district in Atlanta. If you look my name up, they probably have me tied to every person that's in Atlanta. Every rapper I'm probably tied to, every street person I'm probably tied to. They're just me. They're just my influence. This is my reach. Everybody know me. I do everything peacefully. I did everything. I don't condone violence. They're just me. So I just came down here to ask you guys, for some help. Because I don't need help with funding anything. I just need help with leadership, with people knowing what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to bring together. I'm just trying to bring, a peaceful situation to the city that's been going on for 3 years with no problems. I don't like to speak on the no problems part because it'll come back and bite you sometime and an incident may occur. But situations have occurred from people saying stemming from the park, but it didn't happen at the park and nothing went on at the park. Major Mormon know, Major Singh know, we did Born Homes together, Born Homes Day. I talked to him. We hired police. I do everything that they asked me to do. So at this point, I'm just trying to figure out what's the problem. Let's get a solution and let's just figure it out.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. I'll look into this and get with you. I don't know if you want to savor a whole eventful and exciting meeting, but you can shoot me an email with your contact information. I'll reach out to you. Thank you. Councilmember Boone, do you want to speak?
Yes, sir. Also, this may be an issue that we need to deal with our Parks and Recreation Department, and I will make myself available to assist the district council member on making sure that the good work that you all are doing will continue. And I think community development meets on what day? Tomorrow at what time? 1:30. We'd like for you all to please bring this to the attention of that committee as well, but I will make myself available to assist you all with making sure that you have whatever paperwork and whatever necessary licensing you all need. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to
Thank
ditto
you, Councilmember Boone.
that, so please you reach out to my office as well.
Councilmember Lewis.
And before you leave, so you don't have to stick around, I have one of my office, because I want to ditto that too. So I have my office staffer coordinate with his office staff as a lead, however y'all want to do it, because I want to make sure this happens and we get this going, because I done seen it. And please, I sit on the committee tomorrow at 1:30. I agree with that as well. We got to get this going.
Right, next is Thad Griffin. Thad Griffin. All right, next, Devin Franklin.
Councilpersons, my name is Devin Franklin. For those in the public who do not know, I am Movement Policy Counsel for the Southern Center for Human Rights. Normally when I come before this body or the full council, I am here to speak about the legislation that involve approving the lease of ACDC to Fulton County Jail. I try not to wax poetic about what we told you all before, that legislation would not be effective in relieving the overcrowding at Fulton County Jail because it did not address the primary concerns that led to overcrowding. Those primary concerns being onerous bonds that persons cannot pay that keep them incarcerated simply because they are poor, slow indictment processes that are the procedure of the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, and the decision to prioritize policing in the city of Atlanta. A few weeks ago, we learned that there was a young woman who died in the custody of Atlanta City Detention Center. It's not something that anyone is happy about, but it is something that we all warned you about, that because the actual conditions of leadership and staffing were not being tended to, that someone would die on this body's watch, and it happened. Last week, another man died in Fulton County Jail, and he had been in custody for 3 years. I recall telling this body that people were regularly in Fulton County Jail for years at a time. And I told you I knew this because I was a public defender in Fulton County for 12 years. And I regularly represented people who had been in there for that amount of time, even getting not guilties on trials for people who had been in there for that amount of time. And now I am coming to speak to you all about additional research and data that I hope you all take seriously. And I want to invite you all again. You all should have received an email this morning from my unit director, Tiffany Robinson. I'm hand delivering a couple of extra invitations to you all today to inform you all about the Policing Violence Symposium that the Southern Center for Human Rights is holding at the King Center on Saturday the 19th. Thank you, Mr. Bond, for being one of the council persons who has already RSVP'd. I've not heard from not everyone else. I spoke to Ms. Waits this morning and understand she has some other things going on. But I would want to draw the attention of you, Mr. Hillis, being in charge of the Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee, having sat on the joint commission between Fulton County and the city of Atlanta. I do believe that your presence would be extremely beneficial to the conversation that we're having. As persons that we have worked with in the community, as I told you all, we've been drawing our own circles. We've been working with community members, educating them about pieces of data, about policing, and why it's not the most effective way to keep people safe. We talked about why people are extremely in danger in certain situations like traffic stops. 3 out of every 10 police killings occur at a traffic stop. And that's what occurred last week to Mr. Johnny Holloman, who was killed because he was in a traffic accident and had an argument with the police officer who chose to tase him because he wouldn't comply. I'm asking for you all to come to us, come sit with us, converse with us, and listen to the solutions that not only myself, but community members will be recommending on Saturday the 19th. Thank you for your time.
Next up, our last public speaker is Reverend Ray Washington.
President Shook, Madam, Mr. Chair, by now, this city council members have received a photo of me, the Lieutenant Governor, Burt Jones, and also myself with Sheriff Labatt. I'm trying to understand by now, city council members, after being racially profiled by David Holloman of the City of Atlanta Police Department, I think my absence have led to police officers in Midtown working in concert with MARTA Police Department that did false imprison me. Even to the magnitude of Brother Bonds having me in the back of a transport with no seatbelt. The shame of it all is having the City of Atlanta Police Department, police officers taking it upon themselves, city council members, making sure that I do not have viable employment in this city, to the magnitude of going to the NCR building in Midtown, making sure that they fabricate continuous lies, Ms. Amber, fabricating that to the commander of the Midtown location that I don't need to work in Midtown. I think that's not your choice. I have every right to work in Midtown. I do too much in this community. I'm a victim of racial profiling, and I think our City of Atlanta police officers really need to de-escalate themselves, stop the madness, and stop the lies. There is no one after me. Again, I told you that I have a photo that was sent to Mr. Shook, along with the media, Madam Norwood, myself and the Lieutenant Governor inviting me, the enemy alleged by the City of Atlanta police officers, that I'm supposed to be the enemy of the City of Atlanta Police Department because according to them, he has too much power. I think we need to stop this madness. Been on television fighting for justice and righteousness for too many African Americans that are killed. And I also, at the Rayshard Brooks Memorial, a Ku Klux Klansman came there to kill three civil rights activists along with myself. We were the ones that were on the news. And we just was contacted by the Fulton County DA's office that the gentleman that alleged, according to them, that he was supposed to have been dead because we were asking for questions. How can somebody that's on, you given probation, Mr. Lewis, you're supposed to be giving a dead man probation? It's a cover-up. So we need to stop the madness. I have every right to go to Publix, Brother Bonds, and shop in Publix in Midtown and also work in Midtown at NCR building. You all have a good day. Thank you.
That concludes our public comment. We will now move on to our presentations. First up, we have the Municipal Court of Atlanta's quarterly report. Chief Judge Christopher Portis. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Chris Portis. I'm the Chief Judge for the Municipal Court of Atlanta, and it is a pleasure to be here this afternoon to present the court's quarterly presentation. First slide up here is general metrics that we try to provide every quarter, indicating the number of traffic cases that have been filed from the beginning of this calendar year to the most recent month that closed. Total this year for traffic cases so far is just short of 47,000, and we're keeping track with at least being able to close an equal or greater number of cases than those which are filed. Moving forward, a similar metric with the criminal cases that have been filed this calendar year, 2023. So far, just about 5,500 cases have been filed, just short of 4,000 have been closed. Looking at the same type of case information for housing cases specifically, and this is just for the housing code related cases, not including public works, licenses and permits and zoning. So far for housing cases, there have been just short of 2,000 filed this year and just over 2,000 that have been closed. Failure to appears for this calendar year trending down. One of the things that I at least try to point out, the failure to appear rate does track somewhat proportional to the number of case filings, even though cases filed versus FTAs on any particular day are usually about 60 days apart. But in any event, we see that the number of failure to appears from the top of the year through July seems to be trending at least seasonably down. One of the things that I continue to say is we are maintaining the zero tolerance policy for missing court appearances and sticking to the letter of the state statute for being able to resolve that failure to appear and actually come into court. That has had a marked impact on at least the number of traffic cases that revolve or otherwise stay in FTA status. Looking forward to the current year, just looking at the number of FTAs that we've had to date versus those cases that we are closing, just short of 30,000 and just short of 16,000 closed so far. And this is a 5-day-a-week operation on getting individuals in and allowing them to sign up to have those cases resolved. But this is seasonally better given the case statistics from a year earlier. Some of that, of course, has something to do with coming out of the pandemic, but a lot of it has to do with those individuals who receive that information about their license possibly going into suspended status, or they have, and those individuals coming in to resolve the case. Looking at the total number of cases so far that have been bound over this calendar year since January, a total of just short of 63,000 filed, right around 5,000 have been bound over. Right at this point, this is trending right about 7.5 to 8% of the case volume for at least traffic and criminal cases that have been bound over either to the state court of Fulton or DeKalb counties. Looking at the current calendar year from January to present, just the number of warrants that have been signed so far, just over 10,000 total warrants have been signed in both traffic and criminal cases. Something that we continue to keep an eye on just for general public health planning, as well as being able to plan calendars. The total building entry for this calendar year, right at about 235,000, which averages about 33,000 a month. It is still an exercise that we're undergoing to make sure that folks are not only moving through the building safely, but that we're planning the resources of the courtrooms so that folks can come in and get that business handled without it being dramatically impacting on day-to-day life. Looking at the transactions at our clerk's office, this is one that we don't often put up, but just to put it in perspective, when you look at the number of folks who come into the building and then putting that in perspective with the number of citations that are filed at the front window of the clerk's office, the number of filings and cases, the numbers of records that are sent over to DDS on a daily basis, and the number of open records requests, just some general information for you, just so you can conceptualize with those bodies walking through the door, the number of cases and what that means for the front line workers who are actually there processing that paperwork and doing it in a way to move folks along, get those cases closed, and get as many people in and out on a daily basis as possible. Just a quick snapshot. We at least like to, once a year in a quarterly report, let you know where we are with the Restore Atlanta program, which is our community court division over at the court, and just some of the things that we're doing with alternative sentencing. This is primarily a program that is run through the presiding judge, Calvin Graves' courtroom, but it also touches on my courtroom as well as Deputy Chief Judge Chris Ward's courtroom. The number of individuals in the TLC program and the Restorative Justice program for this calendar year, both of those programs are broken down into 4 modules that combine different responsibilities in order for the individual to successfully graduate from the program. And of course, graduation from the alternative sentencing programs affords an individual with the ability to have that case closed, disposed, dismissed. One of the things that we're also very proud about is the amount of community service that we are able to complete at any given time. And if you're looking there at those metrics for the Restore Atlanta program alone, so far this year, individuals have committed about 20,000 hours of community service thus far. Some of that time has been completed on site at the Municipal Court of Atlanta, whether that is through our probation vendor or whether that's through fines that are ultimately converted to community service. But that total number of 50,000 hours is one that's special to us, especially in light of their 8,700 hours, give or take, in a calendar year. One of the things that, as we move forward, that we will begin to, through the Restore Atlanta program, reach out to several of the council members to see if there are any opportunities or desires to have folks who are required to do community service complete that for any opportunities that may exist in the various districts, especially where it may be the individual's home district, and especially for those folks who are 25 and younger. It's an abundance amount of service back to the community, and we would very much like to see that committed back inside the city of Atlanta, especially for those folks who are residents here and residents of your districts. One of the things that would like to update, just to piggyback on some of the conversation from the last meeting, some of the things that we're doing to make sure that the impact of case resolution is felt, at least for those who could be habitual violators or those who seemingly have increasing rates of interaction with the system. We will begin to start fingerprinting in certain cases as we move into the month of September. This is important for a myriad of cases, in particular, for instance, driving on a suspended license, where an individual may be a multiple-time violator, but was not initially arrested. This won't be in every case, but just so you know, the state law requires that anybody who is otherwise convicted of this, even for the first time, serve a 2-day jail sentence. In most cases, those sentences are suspended, but where we have egregious conduct that's laid on top of each other, some of these individuals will be required to be fingerprinted on the back end so that this is something that remains a part of their record, at least in the short term, in hopes that we're able to break the cycle of graduated behavior before they get to felony level conduct. And last but not least, just a quick mention, effective July 1st through Senate Bill 44 that was passed by the legislature this year and signed into law by the governor, there were some changes to the statute that concerns bonding. We will be working with the law department and getting with our partners in corrections to make sure that we update the processes that we are employing across the board to match the new state law requirements. That's something that we'll be working to hopefully get in place and get those steps underway before we get to September the 1st.
Thank you, Chief Judge Portis. I'll kick us off with some questions. Colleagues, if you have any questions, please indicate with your speaker button. On to the traffic cases, and I know we have Deputy Chief Peak here, so some of this may be on him to speak to, but is there any particular reason there's been a pretty sharp reduction in both cases filed and cases closed when you look at January and then throughout the year here to July?
The month of January is usually a unique month. We will see a high volume of filings starting the year, any particular year. That's not unusual. Where the frequency or why the numbers may be where they are, that's something that I couldn't answer. But seasonally speaking, we do see, for instance, when you get to June, July, those numbers typically will stall. They'll be south of where they were starting January. Usually they will then pick up with filings starting August and September and will run a little bit higher going into November and then drop off again in December. There's usually about a 60-day window between when an individual will receive a citation when that initial court date will come. That's the best I can tell you, at least on where we are with the dynamics of what the data shows. I couldn't comment on the number of citations issued and what that may have anything to do with, other than these are the numbers reflected on what we've received.
And pause right there. I did want to ask the Deputy Chief Peak come out because you just jogged my memory about something. Well, first, Deputy Chief Peak, I just wanted you to weigh in. And this data used to be readily available on the APD website, but do you know offhand if the level of traffic enforcement in the APD has gone down, what the citation issuance has done so far year to date?
So, good afternoon, Deputy Chief Timothy Peak. I don't have the actual specific numbers with the total number of the traffic citations readily available. I can look at that information and, of course, follow up with this body on it. What happens generally as you talk about the trends of traffic, you're looking at different details, different parts of the year. Schools out, different focuses throughout the year for our focus as far as crime fighting. So there could be possibilities to where the focus is just different as it pertains to traffic writing alone. Couple that with the other details that we're doing, where particularly some traffic units may be pulled to different focuses, that very well could be an influx or a decrease of what's happening. But I'd certainly like to look at it and give you the specifics.
And one thing, and Deputy Chief, stand there by, because I may need you to answer something else that kind of crosses over.
Absolutely.
And one thing that you mentioned the 60-day timeline. One thing that has come up, and I think this is maybe partially on APD with their archaic actually writing ticket system, but when APD, I know a lot of our parking enforcement is done by ATL Plus, and they write electronic citations, but when APD issues parking citations on paper, there's like a 14-day deadline for you to pay that, and then I think it gets, I don't know exactly how it works. I've thankfully never gotten one, so I've not read, but people go on and try to pay their citation because they just want to pay it and get out of the way and not go to court, yet it's not even been input into the system before the 14-day deadline, so there's no way for them to pay it. Is that on APD? Is that on the court? Is that kind of both, or?
I don't know that that's apples to apples. I probably had to get a little bit more about what it is that you've heard about that. If a case comes in today, for instance, and it's got a court date 30 days from today, if it is a prepayable eligible offense, it will remain payable until midnight the day before the court date. That is pursuant to the state law that allows us to make certain traffic violations prepayable through the Traffic Violations Bureau. Then that money falls off and you actually have to come to court. The 14-day date may relate to a different type of case. Maybe that are parking cases, for instance. They do have a
These are all parking citations.
Yeah, that would have, and I won't speak for the police department, that's primarily the parking vendor itself that are issuing those citations. Very few, if any, and I mean very few, 5 at best a year, are handwritten Atlanta Police Department officer citations for parking. But those are typically issued by the parking vendor, and that time frame for being able to resolve that starts in their system from the day that the citation is placed under the windshield to the expiration of whatever the time frame is that they're allowed to put on there, and that's based on a contract with the city.
Yeah, that was the case, and these, I guess some constituents, residents had requested Zone 1 do some traffic enforcement, and they were handwritten citations by, I think, some bicycle officers, and one of the complaints that came through my office was, it stated on the ticket there was a 14-day deadline, however, the tickets weren't even input in the system, so they couldn't pay them by that deadline.
So, and just so you know, when you're speaking with those folks, in the ordinary course, those citations still would route back through the vendor for that 14-day grace period, because what's happening is you have 14 days not just to pay the ticket, but you have 14 days to contest it and elect an appeal to come to court to try to fight it in person. Typically, that process would still go back through the parking vendor so that can be the case. Otherwise, if we get a raw parking ticket, for instance, it's going to be set in the normal cycle of court cases.
Moving on to FTAs, I don't want to sound like a broken record, I bring this up very often, but we're only halfway through the year and we've had almost 30,000 failure to appears. I don't know what the average fine or fee is, but if it's $200, that's almost $6 million cost to the city. You look at when I'm looking at the FTAs versus the closed ones, are the closed ones actually reflecting people coming in and resolving those, or are y'all going through the system just saying, hey, this FTA is way too old, there's a deadline, well, let's close this case?
The data that you're seeing in the presentation are individuals who've actually completely closed the case.
People are coming in?
Yes,
Okay.
close the case. When we switched, there was one point in time where there was some concern about the ease of resolving of FTA. This was prior to the pandemic. We saw the numbers nearly double than what they would be this time during that period, where an individual could literally walk in and simply resolve the FTA, get a new court date. Well, of course, the word gets out with that, and that ease of resolving the FTA behaviorally was a driver. The numbers now are, I would not say great, but they're fairly decent. When you're looking at the FTA numbers that are in the presentation, also be aware state law requires that any individual who's given a traffic citation If they miss their court date, they have 30 days while they're in FTA status, but they receive a postcard as required by state law, and they are able to walk into court on their own volition to request that the FTA be resolved and they be placed on a traffic calendar. Once an individual goes beyond 30 days, one, that information is transmitted to the Department of Driver Services. The Department of Driver Services will place the license in suspended status at that point, and the judge can issue a warrant on the case. But the mechanics of the law do not allow for that warrant to be placed on a case in a one-to-one fashion, such as in a criminal case. If an individual missed court today, even for an arraignment on a criminal case, warrant could be issued for the failure to appear today. If an individual missed court today for a traffic arraignment, a warrant should not be issued on the case. There's a 30-day window that that individual is allowed to come in to resolve it. That is another reason why you see that those numbers are the way that they are. A lot of folks don't take it seriously until either they get the postcard letting them know that they failed to appear and their license may be suspended, and then there's also buckets of folks who, of course, wait until it gets into full-blown suspension status before they do anything about it.
Just to recap the numbers, close to 30,000 FTAs, almost 16,000 closed, and then I don't know how those numbers overlap, but 10,500 almost issued or signed warrants.
Right.
But just because a judge signs a warrant doesn't mean they're put into GCIC.
Right.
What is the status of the agreement between the court and APD as far as getting those signed warrants into GCIC? So when, someone gets pulled over, that, the police officer knows that that person is wanted.
The status is the same as it was at the last presentation. We're operating under a temporary agreement for 6 months. As of now, that is allowing us to place up at any point in time roughly about 250 or so active warrants on GCIC. So we're going through any warrant signed every day on a spreadsheet to try to identify the most critical cases, in particular those ones where an individual was out on bond and failed to come back. And just an asterisk to the questions that you're asking, when you look at the criminal case numbers, you'll notice that the criminal case filings versus case closed are dramatically different than the traffic case file, traffic case closed, in large part because those cases are more likely to go into failure to appear status. Those cases are more likely where the individual was actually arrested on the front end. They're more likely to go unresolved unless and until we get the individual back into court on a new charge, a new arrest, or if they picked up on an active warrant.
Just moving on to something that's not on the presentation. What's the overall status, you would say, of the infrastructure in the municipal court building?
The physical infrastructure of it? I mean, it remains a continual work in progress. At no fault of any individuals, of course. It's just the number of individuals who come into the building and use the space in the facility. We're still building back from the water damage that we experienced similar to City Hall in December. Maintenance on just everything that gets used all the time is just a continual rolling forward. There's never a point where we are optimal, but it's because 33,000 people are coming in on a daily basis. They're using it, and I mean, every day the building's getting a little older. But the partnership with Dean allows us to be able to address issues. They're responsive to it, but resources, sometimes depending on what's going on, can be challenging. The elevator system is just one big one because we've had individuals stuck there, but to get the parts, for instance, at one point in time was a lead time of 18 months. So it puts it in perspective just on trying to work through those things.
And on the administrative side, what's the court staffing like?
It's still remaining. We have headwinds with, one of the questions you asked about just even the GCI, we had a fully staffed warrants department for a long time. Within the last 45 days, 2 of our folks were poached by the GCIC unit over at GBI because of their training experience. Frontline workers, we tried to get those numbers up to 150. across the board. As soon as we get them up to 150, we, get people resigning. It requires day-to-day in-person work, and right now, that's not exactly what folks are looking for. We try to at least balance that with how we schedule people coming through the building, so it's not only overwhelming on the employees, but that they're not passing that spirit back to the individuals who they're dealing with. But we're still facing some headwinds on being able to retain good folks and get them in.
Last question is, I actually think it was last budget season, fiscal year '23. I think we did an amendment, or it may have been in the original budget, but there was an item in there to replace the cameras in the courtroom. Has that work been completed?
So no, it hasn't. We actually went down the path of trying to make that happen. It took about 10 months, but the procurement vehicle that we were using was not the correct one. So we have started that process over. We're going to have to go through a full-blown RFP to get that done, and hoping that that is something that we get done before next year, this time at least, from RFP to actual installation. It's not just the camera system, it's the recording audio that allows us not to have 10 court reporters. We use that to take down and then have a court reporter create transcripts, and the system that we're using is original with the building when it was constructed, and the parts are no longer serviced and all those type of things. So it's a constant band-aiding of what we have, but we're optimistic that we'll be able to work with procurement and get that done so we can get that in before next year this time.
Given the flex that's had to occur, is that currently in the court's hands, or is that in procurement's hands?
That's a good question. I'll defer to the court administrator. I'm sure that it's something at this point that is in part in procurement's hands as well, because it's been a work in progress for quite some time.
Thank you. I'll move on. Councilmember Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Judge, for your presentation, and good to see you, Chief Peak. But the last thing you said during your presentation about the state law as it relates, is that related to bail reform?
It is related to the current status of the mechanics of the existing ordinance and where they interplay with state law.
Can you expand on that? I mean, what did the state law do?
Well, 2 years ago, there was a change in nomenclature in the law that changed the term recognizance or release on recognizance to unsecured judicial release. The definition section was changed as well to basically be any time someone is released without any type of security, that it is termed unsecured judicial release. This most previous session, a new subsection was added to the state law that governs unsecured judicial release to simply require that before an individual be eligible for it, that a judge review their criminal. So we'll just be making sure that we put the proper steps in place to work with corrections and make sure that that happens.
And so I know that we've had discussions about the city's existing bail reform law. Has there been any progress on, I guess, changes to that law or procedure?
Well, this state law does change those procedures some.
So in what way? So the judges will have to review every potential person that's signing their own bond? Is that the effect of it?
That is the way that the new subsection to the code section reads.
So are you all going to put, what do you those guys called? They were pretrial release officers into the facility again to review those cases?
Pretrial officers have been in the facility for about 10 months now.
Oh, okay.
That was a commitment that you and I spoke about, and we delivered on that. That has been the case now easily since the beginning of the year. They started going over for in-person real-time work end of last year.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. So how long do you think it'll take for, I guess, the operation to get up in line with the state law?
I think that by the time we get to September the 1st, I don't think it will be much more than just making sure that timing and resources are where that they need, and that everybody is fully trained with what it is that they need to do to make it happen, but I don't think that there'll be any problems with seamlessly making the transition by September.
Has there been any discussion, and this relates to the gentleman, Devin, who was here from the Center for Human Rights, any discussion, I'm losing my thought as I'm asking you the question. Has there been any discussion about the municipal court regaining some of its former authority to do first appearance hearings on cases that might end up over at the state court?
Not as yet, none that have involved me. I can't say that there have been no discussions, but there haven't been any discussions that have made their way.
Not anything recent? Right, okay. All right, well, I will relinquish the mic. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Councilmember Waits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation today. I was curious as to the immunity piece we used to do in past. Do you find that's been effective in terms of getting individuals to come in, to comply, and is there any planned activity in terms of offering or sponsoring something like this in the future?
Amnesty, is that what we're talking?
Correct.
Usually the amnesty programs draw out a lot of folks where there are outstanding penalties, if you will, on the back end. We did run an amnesty program most recently in 2021. We ran about 6 weeks of amnesty for anybody who had their case in FTA status. The amnesty, I will tell you now, doesn't bring in as many folks. The general public knows that for a large swath of the basic traffic cases that there is not an outstanding warrant on those cases. That was kind of the catch-all that brought people in for amnesty. Right now, the biggest piece would be if the license was suspended, that'd get somebody in. It's something that we can definitely think about doing and see where it puts us just in more modern, recent times. It just hadn't given us the bang for the resources that it requires to run. What we will do sometimes just short of amnesty, or we will run large dockets of outstanding cases where we may put 300 cases for a month at a time every day onto a calendar, get notices out, and these will be cases that are outside of our seasonable population of cases that are 24 months or older, get notices out to individuals, get them to come in to see if they want to get those resolved, work with the solicitor's office so that offers on the table that are relatively lower on the rung to get them closed. But since COVID, the turnout for those just hadn't been what it used to be prior to it. You're welcome.
Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Judge, for coming in today. I appreciate your presentation. I wanted to talk about failure to appears mainly, and I wanted to know, like, if do an example. So let's say a parking ticket or parking too long, and a person's supposed to come to court for it because they didn't pay their ticket. Now, let's say they now fail to appear to court. Will we send them to GCIC?
No, a couple of things. One of the biggest ones, just so you know, we're on the same page. If an offense was not one that you could have been arrested for in the first place, it is not one that will have a punitive failure to appear, even as a possibility. So if you had a parking ticket, for instance, you did not come to court, at best, your case goes into default and you owed whatever was the penalty for the parking. They'll send you something in collections, not the court, but the company will. But you won't have a failure to appear to the extent that you may be eligible for a warrant. It is only for cases that you could be arrested for on the front end. The GCIC piece is simply where the warrant can go active so that any law enforcement officer in the state who comes in contact with Councilmember Lewis will run the information and see that there is an active warrant someplace for him. For a large volume of the warrants, due to the circumstances right now, they don't make their way to GCIC in the first place. So I hope that answers the question, at least in part.
It did. And I want another thing. I know we got 30,000, you said about 30, almost 30,000 folks that are out there with the failure to appears. I want to know if we can do an aggressive community service thing, switch from fines to community service, because and just thinking about folks with the furthest amount of time, folks has been some 5 years.
Right.
If we can offer community service as a supplement to doing that fine, because some folks are impacted, they can't just pay that money.
Right. First thing, when you look at those are numbers, again, that happen also in traffic cases. So a large number of those individuals will come in and resolve those FTAs. And that's why we put up the numbers of not just the FTAs, but also, for comparison purpose, the number of FTAs that have closed, and also more recently, let you actually see the warrant signed, because a warrant won't be eligible to be signed until 30 days has elapsed. But as to the community service, I think that is a great idea. Of course, it's dependent upon the person coming in to resolve the case. You would be surprised at the number of folks who are not necessarily not appearing solely for economic reasons. There is a behavioral belief issue where the offense is minor enough that folks just don't care, it's no big deal, until they get the information about the license, or until, if it's a criminal case, get a postcard saying a warrant's gonna be signed for your arrest. That's what drives them in. Of course, if somebody can't pay a fine, we're always happy to consider some form of alternatives. The idea is not to economically penalize someone who's unable to pay. The idea is to put something in place that will ensure that this individual doesn't continue like or similar conduct. And that may be very well having them do community service. One of the slides listed out a line item about community service that was converted from people who could not pay their fine, and that represents hours that were accumulated solely because a person didn't have the resources to pay the fine. So probation asked that fine amount be converted to time in the community.
And I think the last thing I wanted to know, what are frontline workers? You mentioned the word frontline workers.
I like to distinguish those individuals from the judges, for instance. The frontline workers are the individuals, even though the judges in the courtrooms coming in contact with the public, the frontline workers are the individuals who are actually downstairs on the main floor when you walk in the building, dealing with individuals at the windows, whether those are cashiers or whether those are clerks, as well as the staff members who are physically in the courtrooms, making the court session actually happen, processing the cases and putting in the dispositions day in and day out.
And you say that's where you're trying to increase your employment?
It really is a battle of retention. I mean, you're working with the public every day. The pay isn't always the greatest, and a lot of folks just don't want in-person all the time work right now. So we have a constant pull and push of trying to retain and then backfill with qualified good people.
I would like to work with you on that, or work with you in HR to come up with a plan too, because that's an entry-level position into a city job. And I just know how much people love those jobs. Sure. So I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
All right, colleagues, that concludes our questions. Thank you, Chief Judge Portis.
Thank you.
Next up, and thank you, Deputy Chief Peak, for your input.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In response to the question, the data for the actual traffic citations, there's actually for the stops a 30% increase for the year to date. However, when you look at the actual issuance of that citation, there's about a 20% decrease, which ultimately gives us about a 9% increase for activity and stops around the way. And you'll find that community, different things, educating our drivers when we seeing different things. The goal is not every single person that gets stopped don't deserve a ticket. When we have those opportunities for education, we take advantage of that. But for those that you can't turn the eye to, then we issue those citations. But that's where you'll find it.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Next up, we have our Atlanta Police Department Code Enforcement Quarterly Update. Peter Amon, Chief Administrative Officer, and Captain Baxter. And more Randy.
Yes, we brought a whole team, including Ms. Lyles and our Deputy Director of Parks, and of course, Captain Baxter. Again, Peter Amon, Chief Administrative Officer, APD. I'm just going to make a few comments and turn it over to the team to walk through the presentation. There are three important things I just wanted to note. First, thank you all and your colleagues on council for the increases in compensation for the code enforcement officer position and a number of other ones in this most recent budget and personnel paper. That is starting to have an effect on recruitment and retention, and so we very much appreciate that. We are looking at other positions within code enforcement because there's actually not just the code enforcement officers, there are other administrative positions that are important as well. And so we are looking to make sure we're compensating everybody fairly. So thank you for that. Second, just want to acknowledge the importance of code enforcement in quality of life in neighborhoods and communities, and also as a measure of crime prevention. And its importance cannot be overstated, quite frankly. And the third thing that I just wanted to mention was, in recognition of its importance, we have a lot of work to do. We'll take you through what I think is some good progress and some good work, but let's be honest, we have a number of open positions here, which is why the July 1st salary increase was so important. But you know, this is a competitive hiring environment. There are a number of things we have to do to hire people. Once we hire them, we have to get them trained. Then we have to make sure as a system that our systems and processes are working well. So the team is working very, very hard, and I thank everybody in the code enforcement team, and we are improving. But I do want to acknowledge there are a lot of things that we aspire to do better, but at the root of many of them just is insufficient staffing, which we do believe we will correct in the coming 6 months. But it is a process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, but I'll be here for questions.
Hey, so good afternoon, Public Safety Committee members, Mr. Chair. Hello, my name is Captain Jeff Baxter. On behalf of Code Enforcement, Chief Shearbaum, Mr. Amon, Director Daphne Talley, thanks for letting us be here today to report out here in Q3. So just to get started here, so as Mr. Amon mentioned, the personnel paper that was inside of the FY24 budget, those pay increases cannot be underestimated. That made a huge difference when it comes to code enforcement. That affected 38 people within the code enforcement section. Those are 38 families that were affected as well, because there was a large gap in salary when it came to where code enforcement was. So again, we can't thank you enough for your support for code enforcement. And I know a lot of you played a big part in that actual personnel paper. I know it went back and forth a lot before the budget was approved. And so we truly appreciate your support. As you can see in this slide, those salary adjustments touched a lot of people, from managers, supervisors, down to our officers, senior officers, and administrative staff. In addition, it also created some key personnel. So we were able to add a code enforcement supervisor, additional administrative support staff, and 4 ATL enforcement officers. And I'll get into that later in the presentation. So just real quick, in addition, with the FY24 budget, it also created the position of Deputy Director within Code Enforcement. So at this time, I would like to acknowledge Ms. LaLang Parks. Ms. Parks, she's a 20-year veteran of the Code Enforcement Office. She's held a variety of assignments throughout her 20 years in code enforcement. She's touched the various aspects of code enforcement, including different supervisory and management roles. And so we feel that she's the perfect person for the job. And we welcome Ms. Parks as our new Deputy Director. So if you look at our current inspections workforce, this kind of gives you a snapshot as to where we are with the boots on the ground when it comes to our daily inspections of receiving complaints, either through 311 or constituent services or zone commanders. All of those consist of our current inspections workforce. Currently, we have 2 code enforcement supervisors, 3 senior code enforcement officers, and right now, we're at 12 code enforcement officers. We have 6 in the field, 4 in training, and 2 are injured off. So to try to put that in perspective, and if I give you some background, this is the starting point where we're at. So this passing of the personnel paper and where that's going to bring us in terms of being able to recruit, if you look at Atlanta, our great city is made up of 242 neighborhoods. Within those 242 neighborhoods, you have 27 MPUs that make up the city. It is our belief, and what we would love to see, is to have at least 1 code enforcement officer per MPU. Now, there's some MPUs that have a lot more traction than others that we'd love to see at least 2 code enforcement officers in those MPUs. So you're looking at roughly 30 code enforcement officers for the city of Atlanta. That's our goal. That's where we want to get to. And again, the passing of that personnel paper is going to go a long way towards that. Right now, you can see there's 17 vacancies. We have 12 pending right now, so we have seen an uptick in applications. We have those 12 pending background and review right now in the pipeline for the hiring process. And we have 2 new hires that were just offered conditional offers of employment. So the needle is moving in the right direction, but of course we have a long way to go, as Mr. Amon mentioned. So next slide here, this is our compliance resolution activity. If you take a look, this gives you a snapshot of 3 solid fiscal years, 21, 22, and 23, as it relates to our abatements. And so this gives you a snapshot of our demolitions, our clean-in closes, and our clean-in cuts. So this provides us, again, a snapshot of our activity with full fiscal years. And you can see the trends throughout those 3 years there. So continuing with our compliance resolution section and their activity, as you're aware, we talked about it before. There was an audit performed by the city's auditing office. Out of that audit, there were some good recommendations. With those recommendations, we are now including all relevant documents that are related to the demolition process. Those are being uploaded in our database, Acela, that we use. And there's also pending legislation to remove the $100 charge for folks to have to register a vacant property. So right now, we have folks that have to, if you have a vacant property in the city of Atlanta, you need to register that property. Historically, there's been a $100 charge to register your property with us. We are looking to eliminate that fee to help encourage folks coming forward to enroll their vacant properties. And then if you look at the next 3 here, so if you look at the citywide, our demolition process, our clean and close solicitation, and our asbestos survey solicitation. So what we're working on is, with the Office of Procurement, Code Enforcement has been working to create a new RFP that will give us the ability to add more city contractors to help us with our demolition, clean and close, and asbestos surveys. So with additional contractors in play, that'll cut down on the bottleneck of moving to the next step when it comes to dealing with the property and making the timeline move faster when it comes to dealing with these vacant properties that we have in the city. So next up, I'd like to talk about our Safe and Secure Housing Initiative. So the Code Enforcement section is a key player in the Mayor's Office Safe and Secure Housing Initiative. We've been there since day one, and I'm happy to say, you know, we share the mayor's vision and that no one deserves to live in substandard housing in the city of Atlanta. We never want to see another Forest Cove. We stand behind the mayor with that. And again, we partner with Public Works, Zoning, the Atlanta Housing Authority, HUD, and of course the Solicitor's Office in conducting joint details at various multifamily housing complexes around the city. We use both data in terms of complaints received from a code enforcement perspective and also crime data, and we try to take and prioritize those locations that we go out and conduct these details at. So far since starting, we've conducted 12 full-scale multifamily housing details where inspections have been done. We have 720 violations that we've identified through those details. And of course, as Chief Judge Portis talked about, those are being dealt with in municipal court through the Solicitor's Office and trying to gain compliance from those property owners. Also with the Mayor's Office help, we're using our partners at AHA and HUD to put pressure on these owners in terms of financial loss to them if HUD pulls out funding and AHA pulls out funding. So we're also leveraging that to try to bring these property owners in compliance. And again, that's a multi-partner initiative that's been going well since we started. These are just some pictures of violations. These are some of the most common violations that we pick up on when we've been out on these details. So up next, I'd like to talk about vehicles for hire. So with this FY24 budget, APD's code enforcement section is going to acquire a piece for vehicles for hire. It's going to fall under the code enforcement umbrella. The FY24 budget created 4 ATL enforcement officers to fall under the code enforcement section to regulate those vehicles for hire in the city outside the airport. So right now, you think about Lyft, you think about Uber, but there's 530, as of this month, there were 530 registered taxis in the city of Atlanta, and that's separate from Lyft and Uber, that are going around the city, airport, downtown, Buckhead, and right now, we need to look at the enforcement of those vehicles for hire, those taxis outside of the airport. So those 4 positions were created. This is what the structure is going to look like when we get it fully implemented. And as of right now, we've only been working in the realm of the administrative part. So the customer service unit has remained. So with these taxis, we've been able to continue to renew CP&C licenses, renew stickers, but the actual enforcement component has not been there. And so that's the area that we're moving into to make sure that we're holding these taxis accountable when they're out picking up and doing their business outside of the airport. And that concludes our presentation. I appreciate your time, and if you have any questions.
Thank you, Captain Baxter. I will kick us off with some questions. Great to hear about the process moving forward with hiring more. Been in a, I guess you would say, a sad state for a while as far as staffing and code enforcement. And
It has, and if I can just give you a quick example. So several years ago, the Office of Zoning upped the salary, the starting salary for zoning inspector. And that was a substantial increase. And that increase for zoning inspector took away a lot of our good code enforcement officers who went over to zoning to be zoning inspectors instead of code enforcement officers. And so this personnel paper kind of brought that back up to where we need to be competitive, just as a snapshot with just within city departments. So.
Yep. So we are looking forward to, currently only have 6 in the field, 4 in training. How long is that until those 4 get out on the street, so to speak?
I'd estimate about 3 to 4 weeks until we get them fully trained up, feeling comfortable with the inspection process, the ins and out of a cella. So 3 to 4 weeks, they should be fully free and out in the field.
What does IOJ stand for?
injured on the job.
Okay. And then the 12 pending a background review. Historically, what's the percentage that make it through that background review, and how long to get that number out on the street, or through training and then out?
So it's tough to give an exact date. So of the 12 that are in our background and recruitment process, the onus is on them to provide a medical background, employment paperwork for where they used to work. So there's documents that they have to provide to background and recruitment. And so the faster they do that, the faster we can keep it moving. But sometimes, people are slow to get documents for whatever reason. But with the 12, I mean, we always try to hope for the best. I mean, I would hope out of the 12, we get at least maybe 8 candidates to make it all the way through the background process. But again, I can't give you a specific timeline. I mean, I'd say maybe 4 weeks, to get, to push to get everything in.
And that job is still posted and will remain posted, I hope?
It is, yes, it is posted. It will remain posted.
And you touched on how we kind of assign code enforcement officers to MPUs. And I guess this is kind of a moot point until we get an acceptable number of code enforcement officers. But, I mean, even, you mentioned assigning 2 to some MPUs that have, dire situations. And I say that District 9 represents from Bankhead to Buckhead. So I have 7 different MPUs, and they're all, they have to be met where they are. But even that 2-to-1 ratio sometimes is not enough. I mean, I have, I'll use MPUC, for example. I know Councilmember Norwood has part of MPUC, but in my part of MPUC, I mean, I can write those down, and there's maybe 6 or 7 of them, and then I go down and do my windshield surveys, as I call them, going through some of my other neighborhoods and MPUs, and we're talking hundreds of cases. So I think that might be something you might want to look into as far as kind of realignment. And I know they also go to meetings, so that's a burden on them to go to the MPU meetings, but just seeing where more manpower and woman power is needed in our MPUs and neighborhoods.
Absolutely, yeah, certainly take that into consideration.
And then, and as I said, this is not a critique of anyone, you or our excellent Deputy Director, Ms. Lyles, Director Talley. This is clearly, as you and Mr. Amon have stated, a people problem. We need more people, but I mean, just getting, once we've gotten those officers out, we've had a NREM hearing. I mean, I'm approaching almost a year now of getting structures demolished. The one that I'm thinking of in my head, I think, was issued in October. There may be some even further back than that, I'm not sure. But I know about that one because I get hit up by the neighbors all the time asking, when's this going to be demolished, when's this going to be demolished? And I know, again, that takes people power. I know we're down to, I think, 2 demolition contractors? And
Right.
You mentioned, you touched on how the solicitations are going out. So what is the plan to get those back to? I remember going to these interim hearings and saying, hey, you're going to see this demolished in 3 to 6 months. And as I mentioned, we're looking at, some that are going past 12 months. What's the process other than getting these people in and getting the seats warm again, to getting these processes move along? And I'm sure the solicitations play into that, and getting contracts in place for those demolitions and abatements and inspections. So please touch on that.
Sure, yeah, so as I touched on, in working closely with the Office of Procurement, we're working to really make sure that this RFP that is created really gives us some flexibility in being able to add several more city vendors when it comes to the different aspects of demolition. As an example, right now, once that demolition order is issued, that contractor has to then go and get the permits needed for doing the demolition through the city's office. And so if they're dragging their feet on that and they're taking their time and they're not making it a priority, we would love to be able to kick them out and put another contractor in there that will work more efficiently. And so I think once we add the ability to have more resources to do demolitions. That'll straighten up the few that we have now and give us flexibility in moving around and moving things quicker.
So we don't have a preliminary timeline on when those solicitations are going to go out?
I heard mid-September, but I'd have to check with the Office of Procurement on that and kind of where we're at.
So they are in their hands, not APD's hands currently? Procurement's hands?
It's my belief, but I need to double check on that. I don't know.
And Mr. Raymond?
Yes, we're working with procurement on that. There's a whole series of documents in a package that they're working their way through. I would just add to anybody listening or to council members, we very much want as much participation in this, in response to these solicitations. So please help us spread the word. We really want as many vendors as possible to participate and bid.
And you mentioned the, I guess, elimination of the fee for vacant property registration. It just ran through my mind that maybe, and I'll see what kind of look Ms. Robinson gives me, but as to whether this is legally acceptable or not. But have we looked into possibly not eliminating the fee, but potentially initially waiving the fee, and then if you get a violation and get to the point to where you get a citation and have to go to court, the court can administer that fee and say your waiver is no longer valid. You have to pay this vacant property registration because you didn't maintain your property. Robinson, is that an evil eye or a good eye?
I mean, Amber A. Robinson, City of Atlanta Department of Law. I'm never evil. So no, you could, in fact, you could eliminate the fee, and you could increase the fine by the same amount, right? The fine to be issued by the municipal court or the enforcement board or what have you. That's acceptable, but a fee is to offset the cost, and so therefore it couldn't be a punishment, based on some kind of non-performance that you would have to pay the fee. Either we have decided that we would like to offset our cost to do something through the imposition of a fee, or we have decided not to offset those costs, but it can't be a punishment. Fines can be a punishment, and we have the authority to issue fines up to $1,000 for violations of our ordinances.
So somewhat related to that, looking at possibly doing, I know I talked about our normal in-rem process and how that's been taking a long time, but even if it gets back, even if it gets back to where it was, still 3 to 6 months. However, there are properties that are extremely dangerous. I will use, one example is burned structures. I've had burned structures that burned once, fire comes out, risks their lives, goes into this vacant structure, could fall through the floor, ceiling collapse on them. Number one, I go to those structures, if I hear about it, it's usually on the news. Number one, no one has filed a code enforcement complaint on them, or I see a case that's 3 years old, probably filed before COVID and hasn't moved along. And I do alert code enforcement to those, and they'll say, we'll move those to the in-rem process, but back to that point, even getting back to the old days, that's a 3 to 6 month process. I've seen sometimes in that 3 to 6 months, there's another fire. We risk the lives of our firefighters again to go out, put the fire out, possibly fall through the floor, roof collapse on them. And I know, if we want to, we can get our city attorney or solicitor to go get some order in the court to demolish these buildings, but if we're talking about burned structures, there's quite a few of them in the city. Is there some quicker process that we can establish for these? We say that every open and vacant structure is highly hazardous, but is there something past that where we can accelerate that process? I know there's a state at least 30-day waiting period, so that's probably as close as we could get. But is that something we could look into, maybe consult with the law about, if we could get some kind of emergency demolition orders that will move along much faster so that our firefighters, for example, are not risking their lives putting these fires out 2 to 3 plus times at these vacant structures.
Right, so I agree 100%. We need to eliminate that as much as we can. And so we would certainly be welcome to sit down with the law department and try to hash out what that might look like. You know, of course, it always goes back to we want compliance from the property owner to begin with to tear that structure down, instead of us having to be forced to tear it down via the city. So we might also want to look at the components in terms of the fines that we levy and the pressure that we put on these property owners once a fire occurs or once it's deemed highly hazardous. So we might also want to look on improving that part too, because we want to push those owners into compliance, obviously, before we get involved in the city stepping in. But we would certainly be welcome to sit down and discuss with the law department options in having a expedited demolition. Again, this goes back to the RFP. If we have plenty of vendors to choose from to do that demolition work, that also makes things move quicker too, so.
And then the other thing that, on the front end that needs to happen, like I spoke about, is, you know, and this onus is, I believe, on the fire department. They need to communicate better to code enforcement when they do have these calls, because people shouldn't be going out 3, 4, 5 days later and seeing that there's no case filed or it hasn't been moved from, you know, some status that's 2 years old to a, you know, referred to MREM situation. So that's something I'll speak with Chief Smith about, but the communication on the front end could accelerate things at least a little bit, so.
Absolutely.
I think that's all I have. I'll defer to my colleagues, and first up is Councilmember Norwood.
Yes, I'm in looking at the list that y'all have, that we have of the properties demolished, the clean and closed, and the clean and cut. First of all, what does the term JTD mean? Is that junk, trash, debris? Did I get that right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And OVG is overgrowth?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So my Councilman Lewis and I met with the city attorneys and the solicitor because we had put into the state code that blight is now a reason for eminent domain. And we found in that meeting a week or two ago last week, that there were holes that can't happen, that it's got to be a public use, this, that, and the other. So we requested that we figure out what we need to do in the state law. When I am looking at all these properties that are vacant, that we are spending money to clean up, to demolish. So we had 95 properties we demolished. We had 14 that we cleaned and closed, and 74 that we cleaned and cut in this one report. So that's 183 properties. So my next question is, what funds are covering the 183 properties?
So our funding comes from the city.
I understand that. Where? Do we know? Do you know which account? Is this part of solid waste special services? Is this part of police enforcement? Where are those funds coming from?
Good afternoon, Lillian
Hi.
Parks, Deputy Director. Those funds are coming from the general fund.
The general fund.
Correct.
So that's not, so why are we paying a solid waste special service fee? That one of the things for that is clearing vacant land, vacant property. Mr. Raymond, you remember we did that. And we put that, we said we couldn't figure out where we actually did these different assignments. So we charged it to the overall city according to the tax digest. And so as I look at this list, you have 0 properties in District 6, 1 out of 183 in District 7, and 1 out of 183 in District 8. So I have been questioning for a year, and we went ahead and passed that we would do it according to property tax value, how we would charge special services in solid waste. So what either today or later I want to get, who's paying for this? You know, where's that account stream? And if that account stream is coming from the general fund, Why is it not coming from special services? And if it's not coming from special services, except for picking up dead animals and doing a little street sweeping, what are the citizens paying with that? Because as you know, that's the reason we increased the millage last year, and we've still kept that millage up this year because we couldn't cover solid waste expenses.
Right. I'd like to circle back to you on that and/or defer to finance. I think there's actually a couple streams of funding that go into the clean and close and demolition. But let us get you a sources and uses document that lays that out, and we should be able to do it. I don't know if finance can do it by the sources by district, but we can maybe do an approximation. So we'll ask them to do that.
Well, it's listed here by district, which is good. I am all for cleaning up this city. That's why I and Joy Shepherd went to the state legislature and got eminent domain as a blight under eminent domain, and then we were told we can't do that. Everything, and then the other thing I want to know is when we were talking, Mr. Lewis, we were talking about the big properties, the big apartment complexes and things that are vacant and terrible. All of these, the vast majority of these are single-family residences. So my question is, are these, is it a case that we can't find anybody there? Is this, the last thing we want to do is start throwing seniors out of their homes because they have an awning that isn't fixed. So, but when I look at this, it's a whole lot of vacant property. Why are we paying city money for someone who obviously owns this because we haven't taken it over, given it to the land bank and gotten some funds for it and get new ownership in it?
So there's a couple things going on. One is obviously for it to be demolished, it has to be greater than 50% deteriorated. Yeah. So and when it is demolished, or if there is a clean and close cut, there's a lien placed on the property. So ultimately, the city funds should be recouped either by the owner of the property directly or at time of sale of the property. So the city funds should be recouped through that process. And then, yes, we are very much looking to rehabilitate and clean up structures of all sorts, but especially the large multifamily units. There have been some demolitions done of the large multifamily properties, but again, given the standards, you in some ways rather, especially with those very large properties, rehabilitate them and make them occupiable in a high-quality way. There's often more funding in those structures, so the 50% standard in terms of demolition is a little bit harder to meet, and you can fix them up. And we're certainly very cognizant of the fact, and then I'll let Captain Baxter add to my response, of the fact that when you move people out of a structure to demolish it, you may be creating people that are homeless. So we have to be aware of all of these factors. Let me, or Deputy Director, add to that.
Yeah, and then we go back to the mayor's Safe and Secure Housing Initiative, where we're constantly looking at multifamily properties to never have another Forest Cove.
Right.
So the onus is on making sure we're holding these property owners for these large multifamily housing units accountable, and I think that's why you see obviously more single-family homes than multifamily. Another component.
Okay, having been down here for 30 years, it just seems like we can't quite, whether it's eminent domain, whether it's this nuisance law. Deputy Solicitor Erica Smith was saying how much trouble she was having getting anything finally resolved. There just has got to be a way. This is ridiculous for a city as desirable as Atlanta and neighborhoods that are as good as these across the city, that you have 6 properties on Elmwood. I mean, just on one street that are right here. So it doesn't make any sense that somewhere we can't do this better. And the solicitor was saying that both Augusta and Macon have adopted stronger laws because they're a county city jointly run authority. So we don't have that in Atlanta and Fulton County, or in Atlanta, DeKalb County. But this breaks my heart, and I also don't understand why our city dollars, why we can't, how are we recouping them? Because I know that Ferdinand sells property on the courthouse steps, and I know there's a whole racket that goes on with that. So, and I do mean that term, so no one needs to worry about having me say I misspoke. No, it's a racket. I have seen it up close and personal. Not every time, but there is not the distance. There are issues that go on with who gets that property and gets to pay off those liens, and then the people can't get their property back. So it's, and what we need is to have all the parties together in the solicitor and code enforcement and the law department and everybody that can have get a handle on this.
Right, so the liens are being placed. Now, when it comes to who's paying off the liens or how that works, the city is recouping through those liens, regardless of who buys it or sells it. At some point, when it's sold and somebody takes possession, that lien is there. But I certainly understand your frustration. Like you said, we have to operate under state law when it comes to eminent domain. And so as the code enforcement section, we would certainly be open to any legislation that's sponsored in state government that would help the city. We would certainly welcome being a part of those discussions.
Right, thank you.
Councilmember Lewis.
I want to say thank you for coming today. And Councilmember Norwood, when you say it broke your heart, and you used a really good term I want to use right now, a city as desirable as Atlanta, to say we have 6 in the field in foreign training. Thinking about like the code enforcement of our city. I'm just thinking about when we've been talking about 12 openings for about a year or two now. And I want to, am I mistaken? How long have we had these 12 openings?
They've been there for at least a year, yeah.
And I know I've just been talking about people been applying for that job, but I know that's an HR thing, and people have to meet certain qualifications to get through the HR part just to get to your HR. So it's just twisted, but we have to, in a city as desirable as Atlanta, if we are doing this right, we should be able to increase our departments to that. I know Councilmember Hillis, he said 2 for 1, and nobody wanted to say the real number. You said 1 for 1 max, right? So Councilmember Hillis, and I love that 2 for 1 number. I want to say 2 for 1 number too. When he said two code enforcement officers per NPU, that's what he was saying, but you said 1 for 1, right?
Correct. I mean, when we look at the different 27 NPUs across the city, most could probably handle just having 1 dedicated code enforcement officer for that NPU, but there's some NPUs that will need 2, just based on the volume of calls that we get.
Well, I'll say me and Councilmember Hillis, and it sounds like the council up here, we think we at least need 2, and we need to be talking about 2.5. Because when you think about a city as desirable as Atlanta, and we talk about we've suffered for over a year and a half now of having 12, it sounds like less than 12 code enforcement officers. I just want to get to the numbers because we got to catch up.
Absolutely, and kind of like the example that I gave you, just from within the city, just inside the city in terms of employment, starting code enforcement officer was 39,000. Starting zoning inspector was 52,000.
We fixed it.
And both those postings are on the city website. So if I'm on the city website and I'm looking for a job and I'm looking at the different postings,
I watched people apply for that job at that job fair. I saw that line so long in front of code enforcement, not one person got hired. And those were good people from the city of Atlanta. So not one person got hired. They got hired in different departments. But I watched that line in code enforcement. But I'm saying we're on the same page. I think I want to see the 2+. I like that 2 for 1 number that Councilmember Hills was saying. It's got a good ring to it, and I want to pair that with a city as desirable as Atlanta, like Councilmember Norwood said. And I want to also say that have we only have 10 code enforcement officers? Do we only have 6 in the field?
We have 6 in the field.
Citywide.
Citywide. It's an appallingly low number. I mean, let's be clear. This sucks, right? So That's why I opened with the fact that we need to do more work. To your point of you fixed it, you did. You gave, that's why I also thanked you for raising that salary to 52,000. That's great. We now have to work in partnership, which we are very aggressively with HR. We're going to be doing another job fair with code enforcement. We're going to be taking a whole series of actions. It was very hard to get traction when the salary was where it was before, but you fixed it. So it's on us and HR now to hire for these positions. The other thing I'll say about the 2-for-1, I don't know that we quite yet know what the right number is for the city of Atlanta. We do have a backlog. Different districts and NPUs may have different numbers. So let's get 20 code inspectors or 30 code inspectors. I think we have 17 vacancies and 12 in the field. Let's get those two numbers fully staffed. And then if we need more, we'll come back to you and ask for more. So, we're certainly open to that. We just need to do the analysis, but we really just need to hire and train.
Yeah, and I'm a labor man, so that's when I said we fixed it.
Yeah.
I wasn't on city council when that number was that low. It was an egregious number. As a city council person, I fought to make sure that number went up. I know and I want to see it go up every year. I want to see them feel the same. The city of Atlanta does not work until the policeman and the trash man are treated better and everybody in between. So that's me right there, full out. I wanted to stay on that because if we have 12 coming in and we say 4 weeks estimated time before they come in, if we think about the hiring process in the city of Atlanta, they've probably been in the process for how long on average?
Well, it depends. Again, to the captain's point, sometimes people apply and then we give them a list of things they have to give us, and sometimes they don't give it to us, right? So if they haven't given us the references or the college or high school transcript or whatnot, then they sort of stall. So they'll stall there sometimes for weeks and weeks or months if we're still waiting on stuff from them. If they give us everything that we've asked for, we know on the sworn side for APD, if you are completely responsive, we can do it within 30 days, even for a sworn police officer. But that's assuming that you give us everything. When we call your reference, they call us back, right? Because that's the other thing. You may give us 3 names, but they don't return our calls. Then we got to go back and forth with people, and so it is more complicated and takes longer than I would like. So we are working on simplifying that.
Because it sounds like about 2 months, 2 or 3 months while a person's waiting. That's a long time for a person to be waiting while they're in the process. I was going to add in 2 more things.
If I may interject, so Councilmember Lewis, we do have at least one member and then possibly another that have to leave, that have deadlines. So if we could just be brief with we got 3 more signed up for comment, but if 2 people leave, we're going to lose quorum. We'll have to take all this stuff up.
This is important to the district. The question I'm asking is so important to the district.
If it's something important to you, then please ask, but remember that
important
some
to all
things
us.
are taken offline. So.
Because we spent the money on it, and the last time they came in here, we talked about the audit firm and the results from the audit. From the team that came in and talked about us improving. And so what I wanted to ask were they accepted and applied yet?
So the audit findings were,
suggestions.
yes, the audit findings, the audit suggestions were accepted and they have been applied. And there's a whole tracking process for that. I think in the first page of the presentation it referenced those have all been uploaded to that system.
That was the most important question I had because I know how much money we actually spent on that. Thank you.
And some of those I think were ongoing things or are in process. But yes, that's all been accepted and applied.
Councilmember Waits.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Councilmember Lewis, for your questions. So my question is, as it relates to the horse carriage area, all of us have received communication regarding the animal that was hit on July 22nd. So I guess the question is, what are we putting in place to address some of those? And all of us have heard about the demolition of the property that occurred where the gentleman claims that he was not made aware. I'd like to hear more about that offline. I'm sure there's some litigation involved with that. And Chief Peak, I'd like to hear your thoughts regarding the events that took place on Friday, the Mays High School Thero football game. It's my understanding that there was some violence at that game, a shooting where there were parents and seniors that were trampled fleeing that event. So those are the things, Mr. Chairman, I know we're very busy today, so I'm happy to discuss these offline. Thank you.
That's your wishes, Councilmember Waits. Much appreciated. Councilmember Boone.
Yes, I'll be brief, Mr. Chair, but I would like to first just thank you for the responsiveness that the NPUH and NPUI have received from code enforcement. The responsiveness on their issues have been really, really well taken care of, and they are very, very satisfied. Secondly, I am concerned, and we can talk about this later with the law, about the young man that is on TV with the Lawton Street, Lawton Drive zip code mix-up. That is a very, very big concern, but we can deal with that at another time. Thank you.
All right. Council members, any other questions or comments? We have been joined by Councilmember Amos.
Fight that she had. Because he keeps us at quorum, right?
Technically, yeah.
Yeah, so I got questions. Yeah, I got questions for
You got a quick question, go ahead and ask it, Councilmember Lewis.
Chief Peak, and it's because, Councilmember, I appreciate you, because it's the city business. I got, my phone was ringing off the hook. As we know, Lakewood does sit in my district. And I only brought that up because Councilmember Waits, her phone was ringing off the hook as well, I'm sure, as we had the fights going on at the park. I had a club owner who owns, a bar owner who owns ATL Sports Bar across the street from there, who told me kids had guns hid in the woods and around the park. And he saw them running to the woods and moving around. So I want to know what are we doing to address this? Because I also know that the last football game of the year last year, same thing happened. We have football players fighting, and I know that I don't know enough, but I know we got to fix that somehow, some way. Because if the last game it happened and the first game it happened, what do we do to improve?
Rick, so thank you for your question. And so what I'll say is we're certainly working closely with the Atlanta Public School Police Department to ensure that we have better communication on the front end. So the incident took place at Lakewood Stadium, and in their attempts to get control of it, the individuals were pushed off of that property, which ended up on the city of Atlanta. So the goal is we've already started having those conversations with their chief as well, Chief Applin. He's very responsive with us. We have a great relationship. We just have to do a better job ensuring that the coordination not as only at the head of the agencies, but ensure that both of our agencies are communicating at the ground level as well, where the incidents are taking place. So we will continue to work with them to ensure that there's a good plan in place moving forward, so when we're having those games, there won't be any return of issues like such.
And what I would like is if we can communicate to the community. I think that the APS and APD have really good, strong ties and strong ways to reach out to the community, even if the students who go to the high schools are now getting a paper that go home to their mom to show them this is what we're doing to make Lakewood safer. Because we had employees of the city who were in those stands who were getting trampled over as they fought. So if we can also communicate the plans to the community members.
Absolutely, we'll certainly be able to push that information.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Peak. Thank you, CO Amon, Captain Baxter, Deputy Director Parks, and congrats on your promotion, and thank you, Ms. Lyles. Okay, definitely. That completes our presentations. We'll now take up claims for favorable and unfavorable recommendations. I'll make a motion to accept all favorable claims, items 1 through 16. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Norwood. Please prepare the vote.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. Those items are favorable. I'll make a motion to adverse all unfavorable claims, items 17 through 75. Second by Councilmember Lewis. Please prepare the vote.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. Those items are adversed. Ms. Lindo, I actually want to go in reverse today. I want to take resolutions first. If we could start there with item number 7, 23R 3845.
Yes, Mr. Chair. That's 23R 3845. Again, that's a resolution by Councilmember Dustin Hillis requesting that the city attorney exercise her authority granted by City Code Section 2-407 to engage outside counsel to aid in the verification of any signatures which may be submitted by petitioners in support of the petition to repeal City of Atlanta Ordinance 210-0367 and for other purposes.
Make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Norwood. Please prepare the vote.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. That item is favorable. Item number 8, 23R 3861.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's a resolution by Councilmember Keisha Shawn Waits to sunset the City of Atlanta Public Safety Commission created by action of the Atlanta City Council pursuant to Resolution 21R 3441.
Member Waits, would you like to speak on your item?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. We've completed most of our work, which was the Citywide Public Safety Commission. Recently, we've run into challenges with respect to maintaining a quorum, given the number of boards that the members sit on. And secondly, we've had a change in the chairmanship several times, and so it's our feeling that we want to submit the findings to this body and sunset the committee.
A motion?
Yes, sir, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
All right, I will second that. Please prepare the vote. Moved by Councilmember Waits, second by Councilmember Hillis.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Yeas, 0 nays. That item is favorable. I will now make a motion to refer this item to the Committee on Council per request. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Lewis. Please prepare the vote.
The vote is open. Will everyone please vote? The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. That item is referred to the Committee on Council. I will next like to take item 9 and 12 through 15 as a block.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Item number 9 is 23R 3879. This is a resolution by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee authorizing the settlement of all claims against defendant City of Atlanta in the case of Shakoba McCoy versus the City of Atlanta, civil action listed herein in Superior Court, Fulton County, Georgia, in the amount of $99,000 to be charged to and paid from accounts listed herein, and authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to distribute the settlement amount and for other purposes. Item number 10 is 23R 3954. This is a resolution by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee authorizing the settlement of all claims against the City of Atlanta in the case of Carl Gilmore versus City of Atlanta, civil action listed herein.
This is not one of the included items, Ms. Linda. We're
Number
not
10.
considering
To 12 to
item 10 or
15.
11 right now.
12 to 15, correct. Item number 12 is 23R 3956. This is a resolution by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee authorizing the settlement of all claims against defendants in the case of State Farm Mutual Automobile Insurance Company representing Kenita Ishii versus City of Atlanta, civil action listed herein, and authorizing for a settlement amount of $5,079 and authorizing the paid from the accounts listed herein, and authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to distribute the settlement amount and for other purposes. Item number 13 is 23R 3957. Is a resolution by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee authorizing the settlement of all claims against defendants in the case of Keisha Turner versus City of Atlanta and Terrence Cousins, civil action listed herein, pending in the State Court of Fulton County, Georgia, in the amount of $14,500 to be paid from accounts listed herein, and authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to distribute the settlement amount and for other purposes. Item number 14 is 23R 3958. This is a resolution by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee authorizing the settlement of all claims against defendant in City of Atlanta in the case of Amira Rivers as administrator of the estate of Martha Rivers versus William Cabito, City of Atlanta, and corporation listed herein, civil file action listed herein, for the settlement amount of $130,000, amount to be charged to and paid from accounts listed herein, and authorizing the chief financial officer to distribute the settlement amount and for other purposes. Item number 15 is 23R 3959. It's a resolution by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee authorizing the settlement of all claims against the City of Atlanta in the case of Ali Saeed versus City of Atlanta, civil action listed herein in the Fulton County Magistrate Court in the amount of $9,000.00, authorizing said amount to be paid from the accounts listed herein, and authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to distribute the total settlement amount and for other purposes.
Make a motion to approve these items. Is there a second? Second by Vice Chair Amos. Please prepare the vote.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Those items are favorable. Items number 10 and 11, 23R 3954 and 23R 3955.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Item number 10 is a resolution by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee authorizing the settlement of all claims against the defendant, City of Atlanta, in the cases of Carl Gilmore versus City of Atlanta, civil action listed herein, pending in State Court of Fulton County, in the amount of $99,999.99 to be the settlement amount to be charged to and paid from the accounts listed herein, and authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to distribute the settlement amount and for other purposes. Item number 11 is a resolution by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee authorizing the settlement of all claims against defendant, City of Atlanta, in the cases of Stacy Favors versus City of Atlanta, civil action listed herein, and Stacy Favors versus Camille, civil action listed herein, pending in the State Court of Fulton County, Georgia, in the amount of $1,475,000.00, and authorizing the settlement amount to be paid from the accounts listed herein, and authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to distribute the settlement amount and for other purposes.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve these on condition that we have an executive session during the full council meeting on a Monday. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Norwood. Please prepare the vote.
The vote is open. The vote's closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Those items are favorable. We can go
On
back to
condition.
our favorable on condition. We can go back to our ordinances for first reading, Ms. Linda.
Yes, Mr. Chair. That's 23-0-1417. This is an ordinance by Public Safety and Legal Administration Committee to waive Section 2-783H1 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances to authorize the settlement of all claims against the defendants in the case of Henry Ronald Stanley versus Christopher Patterson, former clerk administrator of the City of Atlanta Municipal Court in his individual capacity, and Michael Dawson, Tracy Armstead in their individual capacities. Civil action listed herein in State Court of Fulton County, Georgia, in the amount of $130,000, and authorizing said amount to be paid from accounts listed herein, and authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to distribute the total settlement amount and for other purposes.
No, this is a first read, but Ms. Robinson, if you could just make a note that we discuss this at the executive session since we're waiving the code here on Monday. Thank you. Going on to the regular agenda, or back to the regular agenda and ordinances for second reading.
Yes, Mr. Chair. If there are no objections, you can take item 2 and 4 as a block.
Yes, please.
Item number 2 is 23-0-1387. This is an ordinance by Council Members Dustin Hillis and Alex Wan to waive the provisions of Chapter 10, Article 2, Section 10-29C and D of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Atlanta, Georgia, so as to modify the hours of operation on Monday, September 4th, 2023, Labor Day only, for all licensed establishment authorized to sell alcoholic beverages for on-premises consumption and for other purposes. Item number 4 is 23-0-1398. It's an ordinance by Council Members Alex Wan, Michael Julian Bond, Jason H. Winston, Byron Amos, Jason Dozer, Howard Shook, Mary Norwood, Andrea O'Boone, Marcy Collier Overstreet, Antonia Lewis, Amir Faroki, Matt Westmoreland, and Lillian Bakhtiari, and Keisha Sean Waits to waive the provisions of Chapter 10, Article 2, Section 10-209 C and D of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Atlanta, Georgia, so as to modify the hours of operation on Monday, October 6, 2023, only for all licensed establishments authorized to sell alcoholic beverages for on-premises consumption and for other purposes.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Norwood. Please prepare the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Those two items are favorable. Item number 3, 23-0-1394.
An ordinance by Councilmember Marcy Collier Overstreet amending the 2024 Intergovernmental Grant Fund budget, Department of Police, by adding to anticipations and appropriations the amount of $1,649,965.90 for the 2022 Public Safety and Community Violence Reduction Grant Award from the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget and for other purposes.
Motion to approve, is there a second? Second by Vice Chair Amos. Please prepare the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Item is favorable. Item number 5, 23-0-1402.
This is an ordinance by Councilmember Keisha Shawn Waits to amend Part 3, Code of Ordinances, Land Development Code, Appendix B, Electric Code Amendments, Chapter 1, Administration, to create a new Section 101.10 to require installation of infrastructure for exterior security cameras in certain buildings throughout the city and for other purposes.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Yes, sir. The Apartment Association has asked that we hold this particular document. We're working out the final details.
Withdraw my motion, and would you like to make a motion?
Yes, sir. I'd like to make a motion to hold.
Second that. Motion by Councilmember Waite, second by Councilmember Hillis to hold item 5.
The vote is open.
Five yeas, 0 nays. That item is held in committee. Item number 6, 23-0-1407.
This is an ordinance by Councilmember Byron D. Amos to amend Section 150-131 of the Atlanta City Code regulating parking enforcement to expand the parking violations enforceable by the parking management service retained by the City of Atlanta and for other purposes.
Councilmember Amos, I believe law has asked that there be some further discussion and we hold this for a cycle. So would you like to speak on that or make that motion?
Motion to hold.
All right, I will second that. Please prepare the vote. Motion by Councilmember Amos, second by Councilmember Hillis to hold.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. That item will be held in committee. I believe that completes our legislative agenda, Ms. Lindo.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Any final comments, questions, well wishes? Councilmember Waits.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, to echo my colleague, Mr. Lewis, there was some serious events that took place at Mays and Thurl High School. So it's my hope that we would ask APS to come in and report back to the committee in terms of how we can coordinate with the APS police force to ensure that the citizens are safe attending these types of events, given the egregiousness of what occurred on Friday evening.
Did you want to hear any from Deputy Chief Peak at this
If
time?
it's okay with this committee, I know that everyone has other things to do. Mr. Peak?
Deputy Chief Peak.
Thank you.
You all have a question? I'm just getting off of a call.
Okay, so essentially, we had a massive brawl out at the football game on Friday evening. There were seniors, there were parents that were trampled, so much so they fled, leaving their children on the field. And so the question is, and we can report back at another date, what is the plan moving forward? How can we coordinate with the APS school police to ensure this doesn't happen? And also, do we have jurisdiction to have APS officers at these games moving forward, given that clearly there is no control?
So yes, and so what we'll do, as mentioned earlier, we will certainly be having continual conversation with Chief Appleton and his team to ensure that prior to of any major games like such, or even some of the minor, that we have a plan of action in place that we can coordinate resources and know how many people are on the property, whether or not we need to increase that number, whether we need to do with support with them. So that's a moving conversation that we've started having this weekend. The goal is to put a plan in place and then ensure that all of the commanders that are actually on that ground will know exactly what needs to be done, how we're able to move and ingress and egress the kids, ensuring that there's a pickup point for parents in the event that there's a critical issue, so that everything is streamlined and we all know what's supposed to happen. But so we're certainly working with them, and I believe we'll have a great outcome with it. Thank you.
Councilmember Lewis.
And Chief, on the same thing, Lakewood Stadium this weekend was a big weekend just for that entire area, and all that is in District 12, and which is why it's so near and dear to my heart. I know that the last game of the year, the kids were fighting each other on the field. Then when they got out into the parking lot, they fought. Then when they went back to school, they fought. Then they fought again. And so I want to know, what's the coordination with us and APS on the follow up to what happens after that fight? Because it didn't just end at that school, and it didn't just end at Lakewood. And is there any kind of way, I know that we do the Mercedes-Benz and we do State Farm Arena, is there any kind of way we can look at the traffic plans for leaving Lakewood Stadium with the different, can we look at it like it's a major event? Because these are entire communities coming out to this one beautiful football field for Friday Night Lights. So is there a way we can look at that traffic plan a little better so that the residents can move in and around the community a little better?
So I believe what has to happen, and so I certainly agree with you, is how we prepare for it, looking at it, having those conversations and finding out what the true number of people on the property from a public safety standpoint needs to be. And once we get that, of course, everyone has their budget, so it very well could be a situation where we communicate with this legislative body along with Atlanta Public Schools so that we could ensure that the funding is in place should there be a need to add additional resources to that property. Certainly near and dear to my heart, we don't want any kids being involved with the fightings, certainly not with the weapons that were reported. We did make some arrests, but I think that will come out of that actual meeting as we continue to work with APS to finalize what that looks like. Thank you.
Vice Chair Amos.
Very quickly, Chief Pete, I just want to say thank you, actually. The problems or issues we have in 12, I know can be resolved by putting together a plan. And the reason I say that, we got one more day to go before we get past the Beyonce invasion. But for the first two shows, working with Zone 1, Zone 5, the resources that was put there, even our partners in MARTA came out and did some particular things, and it has been smooth so far. So let's get past the day, and then whatever lessons learned that we have learned from the Benz and State Farm, let's implement them over in 12, working with APS PD to make their lives a little bit better. So definitely tell your team and our partners at MARTA, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll share that message, and we'll be sure to make sure that we're all coordinating well together.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Peak.
Thank you.
All from my colleagues. If no further business, by unanimous consent of members present, we will stand adjourned.